Hi guys, when I taught the Zoom class last weekend, I got a few questions, which was great. One of them was, what are some of my standard setups? When people were asking from an SEA perspective, it was particularly versus sword and shield, because in the SEA, usually you just fight against whatever weapons form your opponent happens to bring out. They're generally mixed weapon tournaments, and sword and shield are actually by far the dominant weapon form in SEA. So if you have a longsword, you're much more likely actually to be fighting against a sword and shield than you are another longsword. So I'm going to give you a few of the setups. This will probably be a series because I don't want to just dump 20 different setups on you, and that would be a very long video. So we'll go with maybe 5, and then we'll revisit them next week if we have more questions. So the first one is based on an aggressive opponent, which is most common sword and shield guys. And what I want to do is I want to use my initial attack to either kill them or blind them so that I can hit them somewhere else. And I talked about this one in the Zoom class because it is such a classic kind of across the board. But if I have an aggressive opponent, what I want to do is I want to make sure that I'm out of range, and I'm going to lead with a little gathering step and a thrust to the face. When you do this is just as important as how you do it. So in a perfect world, if you have a sword and shield guy and you see them start to shift their weight forward for the step, that is actually when you want to do it. You want to collapse the range a little bit faster than they're expecting, because when people are caught off guard, their reactions tend to be bigger. And so we want to either stab them in the face or generate a bigger oh shit defensive motion that gives us a bigger opening for our secondary attack. So make sure when you practice this one, absolutely practice extending with the feet. And we want this to be a high thrust. So I don't really think about extending my lead hand. I think about raising my backhand, and just raising my backhand gives me a nice high overthrust that allows me to stay relaxed. So I'm going to do this little gather thrust, boom. I'm going to step off the line and see how my hips are coming here, and I'm going to turn because I don't want to have dead space between shots. I need my sword to be up. So I'm going to raise my backhand for the thrust, turn my little wheel, see I've turned out and I've stepped, and now I'm going to throw at a body or a hip shot, and this back leg is going to pivot so that I can finish away and off the line. Because if this person is charging me, I want to make sure that I gather forward, step off the line, hit them, and I'm all the way back out. And you practice this to both sides. So with the right foot lead, I'm going to raise my backhand. I'm going to aim for that target. I'm going to step, keeping my sword up, that little A-frame. I'm going to pivot, hit the body, and leave. So that would be setup number 1. Thrust, body, or hip, leaving behind the guard, very important. Getting off that line is very important. If you're having trouble picturing this, either sketch or draw an actual line in the ring. And make sure that when you do this, when your cut lands, you should not be on that line because you're probably going to get clubbed in the head. So just make sure that you thrust, hit, you're way off the line, you're back out of range when you're done. This is very important. So that is setup number 1. I think it's pretty simple. You know, the motions are not too complicated, but like I said, when you do this is just as important as how you do it. So that is setup number 1. Setup number 2 is a modification of something that I learned from my night in the SCA, which is a back edge shot. So often, if you are a newer longsword fighter in particular, you're not as good at managing the range, and people get in on you more than you want them to. And so if you get stuck up against the pel here, it can be really hard to throw good shots or defend yourself. So what we're going to do is we're going to start right foot lead. Because most sword and shield fighters are right-handed, we're going to assume that this is the biggest part of the threat. I'm going to turn and I'm going to face the threat a little bit. So I'm not facing directly my opponent, I'm facing just a little bit, not completely 90 degrees, maybe 45, the area that the threat is most likely coming from. And I'm going to take my pommel hand, I'm going to pull it back behind my head with the turn on the hips. I'm going to throw a back edge shot to the back of their head. The nice thing about this is because I'm raising and pulling, I can actually get a nice high angle with that back edge shot. Okay, so it doesn't have to be flat. It can be actually come in behind the shield. You can hit them in the back of the head or even the back of the neck. Okay. If you feel comfortable with this shot, this motion, start working a pivot into it, because this gets you off the line, which means it is easier to escape. One of the problems people have is that they'll throw this shot with planted feet, and whether it works or not, you're now open. So whether that person blocked it or you hit him in the head, you might just be eating one in the body. So in a perfect world, we're actually going to throw it on a pivot and then again leave behind the guard. The way I actually practice this is I will practice this with a step forward because, again, I want to collapse the range maybe a little sooner than the opponent expects, but I do so with kind of a clearing or blocking motion. So the sword precedes me, covering the most likely attack. Then I will pivot and hit, and then I will leave. I do practice this to both sides. Essentially, I just step out with this same guard, and now I'm going to push the pommel, and it hits with the lead edge. Let's see how I'm again throwing it with the pivot. I'm off the line. This can hit behind the shield. If it's a left-hander, that's kind of nice because you step in here and you throw that. You can still get most of the same angle. So that kind of rolling back edge shot, most commonly it's going to be thrown with the back edge. So you can step, make sure that you're picking up a potential shot, pulling the back edge behind the shield with the pivot, and then you're leaving. So that is setup number 2. I found this mechanic tough to learn. Now it feels, of course, very easy and natural. So if you are playing with this and you're finding some problems, send me an email, we'll figure it out. The next setup is really just more of a thrusting game, but it's how we apply it. So if I have a right foot lead and I'm facing an opponent, stabbing around the shield is great to the body, but if I do this and I miss, I'm going to get clubbed in the head, or I'm going to get my sword bound up. So we want to work the angle with the feet. So I'm going to step, I'm going to slide out. So I'm still getting a bit of an angled thrust, but I'm not just pushing my arms and hoping to reach around. I'm using my feet. So I'm still mostly collected behind my sword. So I'm just practicing, and I practice with this point going back and forth because you don't want to practice that it's not going to work, right? So we want them guessing. We want them worried about which side it's going to go to. Then we step out, and then once I've thrown that thrust, whether it lands or not, I will actually back out with the face thrust as kind of a defensive clearing thrust. So I actually practice this as a double thrusting technique all the time. So I'm coming in here, body, face. And again, I'm using that thrust to push me out. All of my attacks should start and end out of range. So again, I'm here, I'm gonna shuffle, step to the side, so my left foot is gonna precede me. I'm not gonna step the right foot and cross. So from here, body thrust, face thrust. And I can again do this to the other side. So it's going to be the same thing. I'm going to be here. I'm going to step out. And here, it's actually, I roll palm down. Boom. So I'm getting some angle around, but I'm using my right foot to step out. So again, I'm not just sticking out my arms and doing this. That's not going to work out too well. I'm going to step out, and then again, base thrust to leave. So when I'm practicing this, I practice to the left, to the right. So that's kind of that double thrust maneuver. If you kill them with the body thrust, that's great, but you still want to get the point up and leading. Even if it's not going to kill them, it's going to protect you a little bit more. So I would get into the habit, especially if you're throwing a low thrusted sword and shield guy, throw the low thrust, but leave with a high sword. It's very important. All right. And the next one is a little bit more of a combination. This one's a little bit more generic, meaning I throw it just as often against longsword guys as I do sword and shield guys, and it's nice because the motions involved can be tweaked pretty easily. So from the outside range, what's nice about this one is I'm essentially getting 2 sword motions, 2 sword attacks in the space of 1 step. And I'm kind of relying on them having an initial defense and then a second one. Usually people's secondary defensive motions are bigger because they kind of go, oh God. So what I'm going to do is from outside with the right foot lead, I'm going to start with the thrust, and I'm going to shift my weight, leading with the sword. Sword's going first, not leading with my face. I'm going to throw. From here, I'm going to push the pommel with the step. I'm going to hit, as if you can see, I'm actually starting to step across just a little bit. I'm going to step out with that hanging guard and leave with the high cut. So the motion looks like that. And again, I finish, high sword, out of range. Very important. So if I'm doing this against a sword and shield person, I might think of this as the thrust to get them starting to defend, and then throwing low, and maybe they've seen that thrust to hip shot pattern from me before. So like, that's the thing I really need to block. So they start to block across, shield's going that way, then I step out and throw here, and it gets a very nice angle. So one more time. Thrust, cut, hang, cut. Way out here. So that's that one. The alternate version is a little different, and this is probably more longsword specific, but I like to throw it. So now I'm a left foot lead, pretty far back. I'm going to start with a kind of a casting shot. Could be a thrust, could be a cut. And what this is going to do is I'm actually looking for a body shot. So I'm going to throw So this kind of starting with my forward weight shift. And I'm going to land body shot. I'm going to step and collect. From here, it's pretty much the same. Now I'm going to step out with this hanging guard and leave with that headshot. And the collecting forward is important. If you do this, you actually are in more danger than if you step all the way in, particularly if you're doing this against another longsword person. You want to be into their handle if that's what's going to end up happening. So make sure when you're here, kind of cast, in tight, step, cut. The variation that I throw on this one is if they are looking for that big overcut. So the initial part is the same. I'm going to start that weight shift and casting attack. Boom. I'm going to start this, because that's what they're looking for. I'm going to start the hanging guard, and then I actually hit back to the same side. So rather than, I'm going to throw it to the same side body. Boom. And then I might still leave with the headshot, because that's cool, and they might need a convincer. It's also, you want to be in the habit of leaving with that high sword. Just like that. And I'm, again, way off the line. Last one for today is the longsword version of the rising snap. So we've all seen some version of that. Rising snap with the two-hand sword is a little different. So we're going to start out of range. We're going to start with our thrusting motion. I'm going to step off the line, and rather than throw down with my arms, I'm going to crunch the arms into the body. So I'm not doing this, because that's really hard to redirect. I'm going to do this. I'm crunching my elbows into my body, but it looks like a nice committed attack. And it has that kind of jerk that signals to people's lizard brain that the attack has been committed. Often when you see one-handed shots and you see the wrist break, people are pretty much convinced that once that happens, it's a committed shot. If I'm holding on to something, oh, maybe I could change it. But people tend to focus on, once they see that little kind of wrist break motion, now it's committed. So we're going to fake that. Thrust, crunch. You can see I can get kind of that little snappy motion just by pulling my triceps into my body, but I'm still coiled, and so now I can drive up. So when I do it on the Pel, left foot's in front, I'm out of range, thrust, boom. Again, I leave. Very important. Always with the high sword and the leaving. So thrust, boom. If you're having trouble with power on this one, just remember that we're crunching, and I'm going to drive and pivot with the foot. So I'm standing up a little bit with it, and then leaving with the high sword. So that's 5 different setups. Play with those, see how they're feeling for you, adapt them as needed. Everybody's a little bit different. And if this is helpful and you would like to see the next 5, or you have questions, send me a message and we'll go on to the next set. Thank you.